This is the moment we've all been waiting for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world. Let's get ready to rumble!
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod. I'm Tony Pesta, joined by Jackson Flickinger, and today we have a special guest, Curtis Brown of SB Nation. Thank you for joining us, and tell the people where they can find you.
Well, you can find me on my Twitter at Curtis_Brown. I'm usually there posting Browns content since I do work for SB Nation. So, appreciate you for having me on today.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to have our first, or I guess our second Browns crossover here, because I did have Quincy on earlier, but it's always good to have some other perspectives. Browns and Cavs Twitter can sometimes clash, so it's always good when we can find a bridge and bring the two fan bases together. Today, we are going to be continuing our preview of the upcoming first-round series between the Orlando Magic and Cleveland Cavaliers, and since it is the NBA playoffs, so much of the spotlight is going to be featured on the best players in the series, one of which happens to be Donovan Mitchell, who likely holds the key to how far this team can drive into the postseason. So let's start here, Curtis. What are your expectations for Donovan Mitchell in this series against Orlando?
Well, my expectations for him is quite simple. He needs to play like the star that we all know that he can play as because, last postseason against the New York Knicks, he did not play well. It's not really a fair assessment to say that, but, he struggled against the New York Knicks. And, the Orlando Magic, from a stylistic standpoint, they can give New York this, not New York, but Cleveland the same problems that New York give in Cleveland. So it's up to him to essentially raise his game like we know how he did this season because he was in the MVP conversation at one point during this season. He was playing sensational when Evan Mobley and Darius Garland went out. But I think the key for me when it comes to Donovan Mitchell, it has to be his playmaking ability because you talked about it, Tony. His playmaking has gotten a lot better than what it was this past season. His ability to find open guys, distribute, run the offense perfectly. I think that's another key for him to essentially for the series to be go in the Cavs' favor. So that's basically my expectations for him. I don't expect him to go supernova. Maybe he could in one game, but for him, he has to essentially play a lot better because the past two postseasons, it's kind of been a little bit of a slippery slope because essentially his points have gone down a little bit since he's been in Cleveland compared to what he's been in Utah. So comparing what he has to do now, I think, the expectations for him, he's got to play extremely well for the Cavs to have a chance.
Yeah, well, he'll be avoiding Jalen Brunson for a change here, who seems to have his number for whatever reason. But he's going to have his work cut out for him against Orlando as well. Jalen Suggs is about as good of a point of attack defender that you could ask to have on Donovan Mitchell. The length around him on Orlando will make it difficult. They have strong rim protectors. When you factor in whatever the knee injury is going to look like, combined with the defense of Orlando and their rim protectors, this could be a tough series for Mitchell. It could come down to really relying on that jump shot. And he's going to have a chip on his shoulder because in the 2020 and 2021 playoffs, he played in 3 different series throughout that 2-year stretch. He averaged 34 points on 46% three-point shooting. In the last 2 series since then, so 2022 and 2023, he's averaging just 25 points on 25% three-point shooting. So that jumper is going to be important. But you mentioned that the growth as a playmaker is something that could stand out and make a difference here, even if he isn't able to score the way that we expect Donovan Mitchell to score. One of the key changes is he has grown as a playmaker, and that allows him to control the game in other ways that maybe that was one of the standout flaws from the Knicks series, that he wasn't scoring and he also wasn't creating plays. So I think Donovan Mitchell's going to have a chip on his shoulder, and I'm hoping he goes supernova. But at the very least, he'll need to lead this team and be the best player on the floor.
Yeah, I think that sometimes, and I know that we're guilty of it, we get a little bit too much into the minutia, and we'll definitely do that. Especially when we were talking about the Knicks series last year about how he was handling those double teams and stuff like that. But in reality, Donovan Mitchell just needs to be the best player on the court for the Cavs to win this series. There's no way I see them winning if he's not the best player. There can be games where, Darius Garland leads you to a victory. There could be a game maybe Evan Mobley steps up or Jarrett Allen, but I don't see them stepping up over the course of 4 games, and I don't see the Cavs having a good enough supporting cast to really rally someone different to be the hero for every win. What they really need is Donovan Mitchell to be the best player, and I don't think there was one game, uh, any one of those 5 games against the Knicks where Donovan Mitchell was definitively the best player on the floor, and that
Maybe the first one, but he
no,
didn't close the deal.
Because
He
Jalen
closed it
Brunson
out.
closed it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean
it was
Donovan.
Jalen. It was just
Right,
Jalen that first game. I don't think he was the best player the second game because Darius Garland took over
right,
in game two.
exactly, and then nobody on the Cavs played good from then on out. So, yeah, that's like we're gonna, this series is just gonna come down to, is Donovan Mitchell the best player? If he is the best player, the Cavs aren't gonna lose. If he's not the best player, I think it's pretty. I think it could be a short, quick series the other way. So and we don't know what we're gonna see from Donovan. Donovan has had a really tough end to the season. He had 2 strong games against a Memphis team that had 8 available players, and like none of them belonged on an NBA team. And he had a good game against the Pacers, and we know how bad the Pacers defense is. So that's a big question mark whether he's physically able to be that guy. But no matter how he does it with his playmaking, shooting, getting to the basket, he doesn't need to do it pretty, but he just needs to be the best player for the Cavs to win.
Yeah, and he did say, I believe, either today or yesterday, that he feels 100% physically now. How much stock do you put into that?
He's been saying that for a while. Somebody called him out asking like, "Hey, we haven't seen a highlight dunk from you." And he said, "Well, you guys don't see it, but like pregame, I do these dunks all the time." And he does. He ends all of his pregame like sessions with a dunk, and he missed it that day. The day that he said that, he missed the dunk.
Oh,
and then the next game, because we were like, "All right, we're gonna watch him." He like went up for the dunk, but then like grabbed the net and like pulled himself up like he was in like high school. And
That doesn't count.
I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know what is going on here. So
Maybe
I
he's trying
don't.
to build up suspense for game one. He might do something. Who knows?
Right. Yeah, maybe. But that's where I'm like, I don't like, he's been saying he's fine, and he's not one to make excuses, at least not like before it happens. So I wouldn't put too much stock into what he's saying.
Well, if we're being hopeful, he does have a week off. I think gradually, very slowly but surely, I think he has looked slightly better. So sometimes in the playoffs, as much as we like to get into the nitty gritty and talk about all these details, it really can be as simple as, do you have the best player on the floor? So we're going to find out. Let's switch gears now and talk about the rest of the Cavs roster, and specifically, who does Mitchell need to step up the most alongside of him? Jackson, we can start with you.
Clearly Darius Garland, and I don't think it's particularly close. I think he needs that other guy to take some of the ball handling responsibilities. Jalen Suggs can only cover one guy at a time, so the guy not covered by Jalen Suggs needs to be doing something. And sometimes it's going to be Darius Garland. So I really think he needs to step up. I think you can really answer any of the. I don't think there's a wrong answer for this question, honestly, because you need Jarrett Allen to be the aggressive guy that he was from December through February. You need Evan Mobley to be a decisive decision maker. But really, Darius Garland needs to be the guy that we all know he has the skills to be, but hasn't really shown that he can be alongside Donovan.
There's been some flashes of the old Darius Garland we knew, but this season has definitely been rough for him because when he suffered that jaw injury, he lost a ton of weight. That really does take a lot out of you. When people are saying, "Oh, how come he can't put the weight back on?" I'm like, he's playing basketball, man. Like, he's running up and down the court doing a ton of cardio for 48 minutes. You're not going to put that weight back on, and that has affected him a little bit in terms of his confidence and finishing at the rim. I've seen it multiple times. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't look great for him now, but I think when the season's over with, he'll be able to put that weight back on. And whether or not he's on the team or not, I think this season is a little bit of a throwaway. This isn't the real Darius Garland we all know he can be. because when he's healthy and playing at his best, he's pretty damn good. That's why they kept him over Colin Sexton, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, you can't doubt that. You can't doubt Darius's skills, and I think his skills still do come through. I think there is still some conflict there between how to best use the skills, even the skills that he has now, because I think that, like you mentioned, his finishing at the rim, it's been bad, but he needs to find other ways besides just the pick and roll to really get involved in the offense. And we see that for stretches. We see him sometimes move off ball. Maybe they're just saving it for the playoffs, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't count on it.
I saw someone on Twitter say Darius needs to be eating 6,000 calories a day this week to get those 13 pounds back as quickly as he can. But no, I was watching some of his highlights against the Magic from earlier in the year, and he was getting to the rim and finishing some tough shots. It's truly night and day, the difference there.
Oh, yeah.
In his 3 games against the Magic this season, he's averaging, going to round up, 27 points, 4 rebounds, 8 assists, while shooting 50% from the floor and 39% from downtown. So it's going to be really important that he has big games and big moments. Otherwise, it's going to be way too easy to just overload on Donovan Mitchell and put a ton of pressure on him. DG has to be able to relieve him there. Curtis, who did you have? Would you also say DG is the next important?
I was going to say Garland, but I thought about another player, and it was Evan Mobley, because last postseason, both him and Jarrett Allen, they really struggled. They got bullied in the interior. Not many of them were picking up, any rebounds at all. They were just letting guys get these offensive rebounds, and that led to those multiple second chance points. Orlando isn't near what the Knicks were last season in terms of offensive rebounding, but they have that kind of play style, which they're going to be physical with you. And I think Evan has to match that physicality. In terms of his offensive skill set, I think his shooting has gotten a little bit better, despite what anyone on Twitter says. Trust me. And when you watch him and Allen between last year and this year, the spacing is a lot better than what it was. They're not just tightly together. It's a little bit more wide, and that allows Evan to shoot the 3 ball more effectively. I mean, it's a little bit a work in progress, but you can see the confidence he has when he lets the 3 ball go. So he's going against a team in Orlando, which is really great defensively, and they're going to bring that same physicality, not to the extent the Knicks did, but I think his offensive game needs to be a little bit more improved, have a little bit more confidence in attacking the rim, rely on the 3 ball if the shot is there for him. And defensively, he just has to hold his own against Wagner and those guys that he's going to be going up against.
I think it's really smart to bring up the defensive side. One of the things I think is really interesting is that I don't know how they're going to guard Banchero. I don't know if, you keep pushing, Tony, you keep pushing the Isaac Okoro on Banchero stats and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's
bulk of
definitely to start the games and stuff like that. And I think that's actually a really good matchup for him, because we all know that Mobley's a really good off-ball defender. But what you saw in that Knicks series is, one, he did a great job on Randall, who I think Randall may be a fraud, but that's a separate conversation. But one of the things that I think he got in trouble in that Knicks series is when he was helping off-ball, he really allowed the Knicks bigs to get behind him, get those offensive rebounds. And if you're on Banchero, you're not gonna leave Banchero. He is the Magic's offense. Banchero was in the 100th percentile for usage this season. Everything is going to run through him. So if he's guarding Banchero, I really like that matchup for him and kind of for the team. And I think that's really going to help them in the offensive rebounding thing. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on with Mobley.
Yeah, I think they can throw multiple bodies at him. They can throw Okoro at him one time, then they can throw Mobley at him. Keep Orlando guessing, because I think Okoro is talented enough to go against Banchero. And Tony brought out the numbers when it comes to Banchero. He's pretty much locked down on him. So if you can throw those two, make things difficult, and force someone else on the Magic to beat you, because as Tony mentioned, and I looked this up too, they're one of the worst offensive rating teams when it comes to teams in the playoffs right now. They do not generate.
I think they were last.
Yeah, I think they're around that too. They're not good offensively. So if you force someone other than Paolo to beat you, I think the chances are good. But if he's starting to get hot and you see that momentum swing a little bit, I think you're a little bit danger there.
Definitely.
And to that point, I do wonder if we see some zone defense against the Magic because they're not a great three-point shooting team. And if you don't want to strain Mobley too much throughout 48 minutes, if you're throwing a zone at Paolo, making it a little bit more difficult for him that way. With Okoro, it's not that I feel very confident that he can handle that matchup in spurts. The bigger concern is, can he stay on the floor offensively? Can he do enough there to warrant being out there? But that's, we've talked about that all season. I'll stray away just because I knew you would probably bring up DG at least. So I wanted to give Allen some shouts because we talk about, the power of friendship. And really, Jarrett Allen has been Donovan Mitchell's best buddy. And the sun. And watching
the
sun.
sun. Power of the eclipse.
The eclipse
the
powered
moon.
him up. Donovan Mitchell and Jarrett Allen have been such a great duo this year. Mitchell has thrown 80 assists to Jarrett Allen. That's the most of any combo on the Cavs. It's the second most Mitchell has ever thrown to an individual teammate throughout a season. As far as getting Mitchell some clean, open looks, some of that is going to be Allen setting screens off ball for him, operating the two-man game with dribble handoffs. When Mitchell is trapped, a lot of pressure is going to be on Jarrett Allen to make plays in the short roll. He's also, like I said, going to have to handle those dribble handoffs with confidence. Allen threw 34 assists to Donovan Mitchell this season. That is tied for the second most assists Allen has thrown to an individual teammate in his career. And he just can't settle for being robotic. He can't allow the Cavs offense to get bogged down. It can't turn into a slog if Allen catches the ball in those situations. He needs to make quick decisions. And if Orlando's, it's basically this simple. Orlando's going to dare Allen to make plays, and he has to punish them for it. Whether it's driving to the rim himself, flowing into another action, he just can't allow this game to turn into a rock fight. A lot of that might come down to the decisions he makes when the ball is in his hands.
One of the things that I think is important to keep an eye on is his aggressiveness, especially because I think the Cavs are probably going to be closing games with a smaller lineup. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, and you need Allen to kind of be that center, be that aggressive player throughout, because if he's not aggressive for the first 45 minutes, he's generally not aggressive in the last three. Yeah. So I think that's something to keep an eye on because it's really tough I think this would be a tough team to close with Mobley as the center, and I don't think the Cavs have the spacing in a tight game to really close with Mobley and Allen out there. So that's something that I would just keep an eye on.
Yeah, definitely.
I would be a little bit nervous about Mobley being out there, without Allen, because that kind of concerns me a little bit. I think he needs to have a little bit more time with Allen on the court instead of with Allen being out. So, that kind of concerns me a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The lineups that are going to feature Garland and Mobley with Mitchell and Allen on the bench, those are going to be something to watch for. They're going to need to survive, at the very least survive. Now let's
shout out to Danny Green and Jetty Osman who were anchoring those units last year in the playoffs.
They truly were.
Yeah.
Now let's broaden our scope a little. I don't know exactly where you guys want to take this conversation, but if you're going to focus on an individual member or just long-term future of the franchise. But the final topic that I have for us today is, what does a first-round victory mean for this team? What would we be able to take away if the Cavs take care of business in round one? Curtis, you can start.
Well, for starters, you can win a playoff series without LeBron. That's one thing. But it's been a long time since Cleveland has won a playoff series, as I mentioned before. But, considering how the season has gone for Cleveland, it's been a lot of highs, a lot of really lows. It's been an inconsistent season at best. What they need is one playoff series to gain a little bit of confidence. Like, hey, we could probably do something with this core. It might not result in a championship, but it's progress. Because last season, I was thinking, they got to win at least one playoff series and things will go perfectly fine. And they went up against the Knicks and everything went bad super quick. Losing in 5 the way they did, I think it left a little bit of a sour taste in their mouth because not only did they get beat, they got dominated physically. And, a lot of people have been calling this team soft and how mentally weak they are. I don't think they're soft. I think they're a lot mentally stronger than I think people give them credit for. Because at times during the season when they're down at least by double digits, like 20 points, I'll bring up the Celtics game when they were missing Mitchell and key starters. I thought them coming back and winning that game, like, hey, this team has the mental fortitude to not give up. So I think this series forward could mean a lot to them. I don't think it's going to change the long-term future of this team because, even if they do win this first round series, they're probably going to make another head coaching change. JB is pretty much
Mhm.
gone. I think we can all be in agreement with that. But for the core of Mitchell, Garland, and Mobley and Allen, I think you can look at this core and say, hey, we can win a playoff series with this four together. We don't have to necessarily break it up. I do think that winning this series, because if they beat the Magic, they'll either play Boston, whoever is the winner of the play-in
Mhm.
between the Bulls or the Heat. We don't know who's going to play. But if they went up against Boston, I think they can give Boston a run for their money. Boston is not a perfect team by any means. The one thing I'm concerned with when it comes to Boston is their inability to close games, and they're too three ball reliant because
Mhm.
we've all seen it before. When the threes are hitting, everything is going well. But once the threes aren't hitting, they're just playing ISO ball. It's your turn ball. They're not generating any plays. I don't know what they're doing. So I think if Cleveland were to be matched up with Boston, they can give them a run for their money, but they have to win one series to show a little bit of growth. Because if you don't win this series against Orlando team that's not near what you are when it terms of talent, yeah, everybody is probably not going to be on the team. I think changes will be made, but you have an ability to essentially right your wrongs from last postseason. You got bullied by a New York Knicks team that wasn't better than you, and you're going against a team that's not near what the Knicks are, but they are going to give you the same problems that the Knicks did in terms of their physicality. They're inexperienced too, so they're going to the series with little to no expectations. They're just happy to be there, but that doesn't mean that they're going to raise their game if the opportunity presents itself. So for me, I think it's a confidence booster internally and a little bit of a morale booster if they can just win one playoff series. That's all they need to do is just win one.
I think winning one playoff series is like the bare minimum that
Mhm.
you can do because you don't go. The Cavs didn't go all in for trading Lowry Markin and Colin Sexton, multiple firsts, Ochai Abaji for one playoff series victory in 2 years. Like I don't think they would have made the trade if they would have known that. But let alone if you lose this series, that's an absolute failure. So I think that's kind of on the line, and then you have to prove that you can hang with some of the best teams in the Eastern Conference because if even if they did get past the series and I don't have as much confidence as you do in them in a matchup against the Celtics, at least not without Dean Wade. I think Dean Wade was actually really helpful, like a wing that can
I keep
actually do
forgetting.
something.
I keep forgetting Dean Wade is. I'm like, I might have to change my opinion based off that now. But
Yeah, well, so I'm I think they need to show that they belong with some of the best teams in the league for this to continue to justify this version of this team because they've been building from 2018 since LeBron left. They've been building for this. Like this is what they have to show for it. And if it's another first round exit, that's a failure. And I don't even know if it's not a failure. I don't think it's not a failure if they get past the first round, but it's not a success either.
They should have won a first round series last season. That's where we should have been at. So I think you could say we are a year behind. With
Mm-hmm.
that being said, there's really no sense in dwelling on that at this current stage. Like we are where we are. Like you said, it's the bare minimum. They need to win this series.
Mm-hmm.
There's basically no excuse. I think that's part of the way. I don't want to open up the whole like tanking the last game discussion again, but that's part of why you
Right.
opted for a team like Orlando because you lose to Orlando, there's no excuse. You can't justify losing to this team. And that's not to say that Orlando is a bad team. They're a talented team. They could absolutely beat the Cavs, but it's different than facing Philadelphia, for example. And so, again, they should have been at this point last year where getting a first round series was the bare minimum. We are where we are. You can't skip steps in the NBA. Winning this series, if we're focusing on the small picture, winning this first round series would be a step in the right direction. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because if you get smacked by Boston and it's not even close, that's another step backward. So I don't think you can overstate the potential momentum you build from winning that first round series. That's not to say that I think they will beat Boston, but things change. You get a first round victory that feels like a chip on your shoulder right now. You get past that, you can actually do something. But if you don't get out of the doors, if you can't get out of the first round, then what are we doing here? There's going to be a lot of big changes. So the bare minimum they need to do, and what I want to focus on right now, is just taking that first step in the right direction and getting over this hump and getting out of the first round.
I think that it's interesting that you brought up the momentum, because I think this team, more than any other Cavs team I've followed, is really reliant on momentum. When things are going right, it seems like they can beat anybody. We saw in that stretch from December through February, they weren't beating teams, they were absolutely murdering teams. And it was just every single night they were coming out and punching teams in the face.
The
and then
Cavaliers.
we saw the opposite of that when things were going bad, where it wasn't that, oh, we can't get over the hump because we don't have a late game scorer like Donovan Mitchell. It was like, no, we can't even get out of bed because we don't have Donovan Mitchell. And they're just getting run off they're just getting punched in the face from the opening tip. And that's, if the Cavs, it's almost important if the Cavs win the series, how they win the series. Like, are they the ones dictating the terms? Are they the ones that are the aggressors? Or are they just kind of like, well, the Magic really have a poor half-court offense. They kind of shut that down, and they just kind of squeaked out victories every game. I think it really matters how, the result matters, but how it happens matters too.
Yeah, I think you make a valid point. Like, if they're just barely scraping by, I'm like, yeah, they won the series, but it wasn't as impressive as I think it was. And I look at this roster from this year to last year, it's a lot better than what it was. I mean, we still lack a wing, but the bench is a little bit better, because the one reason why we lost that Knicks series is because the bench literally didn't have anyone that was reliable. And you look at the bench this year, you got Max Strus from Miami. I think he's really a X factor in this whole thing, because once he's shooting and he's on. And you got George Niang. He's a little bit inconsistent, but he can have his moments. And you got Tristan, and you got Marcus Morris, and those two guys. They might not have it, but they can bring a little bit of juice and a little bit of aggression that the Cavs didn't have. So for me, it's just essentially win this series, and maybe you think about what's going to happen next. I'm not going to be satisfied with just a first round win, as everyone knows. I'm like, yeah, we won a first round series. So what? I think we can do more than that. I'm not saying they'll make a deep playoff run, but you need to show progress with the core that you have in order to keep this group together, because I'm pretty sure no one wants to go through another rebuild of bad basketball. That's not fun at all. It really isn't. So I'm hoping that this series if they win this series, it's a step in positive momentum and direction.
This is the first step. They should have taken it last year. They have a chance to take it again. I wouldn't say that I'd be completely satisfied with one series win, but I think dismissing it is also incorrect. I think we got to focus on where we are right now, get this win, and then we can talk about what happens against Boston.
You'll find a way to spin it positive. It doesn't matter what happens.
Well, the positive is that even if they lose, you can retool this roster still. There's still things here, as long as Donovan Mitchell doesn't hate us and leaves. But that's
I'm sure
I want to talk more about that in another episode, because I don't want us to be here all day. So
thank you.
We're gonna end this show the right way. Me and Jackson have already shared our prediction for the series. Curtis, let's hear it. Who do you got, and in how many games?
Because last postseason with the Cavs, I went the Cavs in 7, and they end up getting swept end up getting gentlemen swept in 5.
We know.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make that mistake again. Why not? I have them winning in 7. I think this series will be competitive. I think it will be close. There will be one game which a team dominates, and another game which it's close for one reason, and the team just blows it wide open. But I have them winning in 7. I think this series will be really defining for many players on this team, and for JB, because he's going against Jamal Mosley, who has literally no coaching experience in the postseason. So we'll see if JB knows what he's doing and not make the same mistakes that he made past postseason. But I have them winning in 7. I think the series will be a lot closer than what people think.
Well said. Yeah. For better or worse, we are going to learn a lot about this Cavs team, top to bottom. That's all for today's episode of the Junkyard Pod. Special thanks again to Curtis for joining the show. Thank you to everyone who watches and listens. It's going to be a fun series. And with all that being said, go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs.